You are the assassin of Black. Tell me, why are you with Berserker? She inquired bluntly, staring at her. What is he to you? Oi, Mordred growled. Just what the hell do you think you're doing ignoring the rest of? Without so much as a glance, Atalanta loosed 3 arrows into the wall opposite her. Be silent, Saber, she replied in a dead voice. This doesn't involve you. Once those harrowing orbs found Jack the Ripper. This time, Jack gave her reply gladly. Anu-chan saved me, she answered, beaming with all the innocence and guilelessness such as only a broken child could possess. He heard my voice when no one else would. He wrapped me in blankets when I was cold, and told me I was safe. He promised to feed me and take care of me. He's important. It was like flipping a switch. Atalanta's hand descended for a second time, not to attack, but to ruffle Assassin's ashen hair. This time there could be no mistake the blissful expression on the girl's face. Beaming, she leaned into the outstretched palm and hummed softly. Then Archer was past her, nimbly skirting the small servant in favor of her master. Naruto made no effort to rise. Indeed, he remained right where he was, meditating in spite of the danger. If attacked in this position, he risked suffering a fatal wound before he could defend himself. Even then, he didn't move. Had he known her thoughts, he might have. Through this single act alone, he'd unknowingly endeared himself to the nimble huntress more than any mortal before him. Beyond that, his actions warmed her heart. Not enough for her to consider breaking that sacred vow, but enough to thaw the ice between them. Closer than before. In this alone, this simple act of kindness would become a catalyst that led to something extraordinary. A miracle beyond miracles, that act of defiance, in which one turned their back on the heavens, and another forsook the gods themselves. But for now, neither knew. May I join you? Naruto merely sighed. Sure. Plenty of room. After a moment's consideration, Archer claimed a space beside him. I take it you have a plan to assault the Black Faction's stronghold? She posited after a long moment. Naruto frowned. Well, we do, but... Then, I shall join you. It wasn't a question, but a command. A beat of uneasy silence passed between the uneasy party. Jean and Sisigu had held their tongues until this moment, fearing the worst and trusting the servants to handle it. Now that they had diffused the tension, they found themselves at something of an impasse. For another servant to simply waltz in and join forces with another out of the blue. It was unheard of. That Atalanta of the Red Faction had just done so without her master utterly baffled them. Jack, for her part, was content to stay silent, so long as her Oni-chan continued patting her head like that. And Mordred? Well, did you seriously just... Saber opened her mouth to argue. Crackle of awareness interrupted her. Ugh! One of the damn knives goes off now. Change of plans, guys. I'll be going on ahead. See ya in Trifas. With a laugh, Naruto vanished, leaving a broken kunai behind in his wake. The last he heard of them was an exasperated growl belonging to said huntress. Not again? Then they were gone, the world lurching and twisting around him in a swirling vortex, flashes of gold and red interposing with silver as he surrendered to the pull of the technique. In this form, it was very much a one-way jutsu, allowing for him to travel great distances at speed, but at the cost of not being able to return so lightly. This kunai in particular had been the one he planted near the highway. That it had triggered meant one of two things. Someone had either attempted to remove it, or it had detected a threat against a third party. It was the latter that worried him. He'd never mastered Hiraishin, and in this limited capacity it was very much a double-edged sword. It was a ruler in this war, and if she'd been attacked. Unfortunately, he neglected a vital component in this. The 9 kunai could be moved, flung, or thrown, such as an explosion rendering it airborne. And now, by that very definition. Him. Reality rushed back with a dull roar, and a world's worth of momentum came with it. Fire flickered in his vision, forcing him to squint even as he plummeted to the earth. By the time his vision cleared, he beheld a startled face that he hoped, prayed wasn't the ruler-class servant. By then it was already too late. He couldn't have stopped even if he wanted to. Not that it mattered anymore. Whomever had drawn nearest to that kunai was in for a world of hurt. And several broken bones beside. He could make them pay for disturbing him, at the very least. Even as he fell, he saw them fighting. Two figures waged war like never before. One a burning man, the other a woman with striking gold hair. That was all the information provided by his heightened senses at this distance. Judging by the woman's efforts, she was the one forced on the defensive, yet still she fought on despite her opponent's lance. Lance? Yes, that was definitely a lance of some sort, which made the other one ruler. Ah. Good. Well, that was easy. Dynamicentry.bio. A pale face flashed before his vision. This was all Lancer of Red Herd had time to see. That brief, searing flash as something fell out of the sky. Rigid leg, straight as an arrow. That booted foot swooping towards him in a searing hurricane. Then a cackling berserker drilled him headlong into the earth, as though he'd been struck by the hand of an angry god. Listen to you. Life is meant to be lived, not bound by pointless rules and dogma. Cry havoc. Vroom. NRGAG? Frankenstein felt the explosion long before she saw it. Like a distant rumble from far shores, so too did she feel the earth tremble beneath her feet as she picked a fresh bouquet of flowers. It was a very nice explosion, a small animistic part of her brain mused. The blast was very large, very loud, and more aptly very bright. Even at this great distance, one could see the mushroom rising out of what had once been the highway. A few moments later, a fresh burst of fire lit up the night. Ah, pretty. The berserker spared the distant battle a moment more of her attention before doggedly returning to her task at hand. In her eyes, the fight didn't matter. All the servants of Black Bar, one missing assassin, were already assembled here at the castle, which meant the battle raging outside of the castle limits was of no consequence to her. If the Red faction wanted to fight amongst themselves that badly, it suited her just fine. Regardless of the victor, they would come sooner or later, and when they did... Hand settled on her head, mussing her hair. What you doing? Burn. Berserker bolted to her feet and flailed her arms in spectacular fashion, the motion scattering the flowers in her hands and launching them into the air. An enemy? Here? To her credit, her brief moment of panic endured all of an instant before sense reasserted itself. Then she spun around and, putting the full weight of her body into a single swing, slammed her mace into her attacker's visage with all of her considerable might. At least, that had been her intention. White teeth flashed out at her in the dark. Now, that wasn't very nice. Can't have you dispelling me just yet. Imagine her surprise then, when a muffled grunt reached her ears, and she found her assault stalled against an open palm. A lone crimson eye blazed back at her from the gloom, the other hidden behind the unwieldy bulk of her weapon. Clawed fingertips closed around the business end of the hefty mace, and squeezed, buckling the hardened metal of her favored tool. Trapped caught in mid-swing, a flicker of surprise flitted across her expressionless visage. One of the weaker servants she might well be, but she still possessed superhuman strength, more than render anyone she disliked into little more than stain. The enemy had just stopped that very strike. With one hand, servant. Desperate thoughts skittered through her broken mind as she struggled against the intruder. To no avail. For all her might, Frankenstein found herself forced back one step, then another, and another, yet another still. Though the other remained concealed behind his back, though sparks skittered from her weapon and into his flesh. Though she strained against him with all her might, her opponent remained utterly unfazed. No, if Berserker had to give voice to his response, though she was loath to do so, she'd say he looked almost happy. Right then, let's move this thing so I can talk. Shunting her weapon down and to the right, the blonde slammed a booted foot against the mace, trapping it with his foot against the soil. In disbelief, she tugged at it, struggling to free her cherished tool to no avail. As though it had well and truly become one with the garden, so too did she find it impossible to move her mace. What sorcery was this? He couldn't possibly be this strong. Could he? Frantic, a fresh surge of current coursed through her weapon and into the iron-shod shoe holding her at bay. Instinct ground against her. Destroy. Crush. Kill. Her opponent merely laughed. Sorry, I'm practically immune to lightning after all those spars with Sasuke back in the day. Leaning over her entrapped weapon, he flashed her a sunny smile. Anyhow, nice to finally meet you, fellow Berserker. He grinned at her with half-lidded eyes, extending his now freed hand in what she could only assume to be a gesture of peace. I'm Berserker. Wait. No. The blonde paused, thumbing his chin. That came out wrong. I mean, I'm Berserker this time around, but you're clearly also Berserker. And oh god, this is gonna be confusing in it, D. Aye. Wordless hiss was her sole response. Oi, don't give me the silent treatment, her attacker groused. I know you can talk, Frankenstein. Muscle jumped in her jaw and she saw red. Berserker! Finger thrust itself in her face, a brazen defiance of her rage. Aha! Knew it! I rest my case, madam. She nipped at the outstretched digit until he withdrew it. Okay, Berserker. I know you can talk a little despite the madness enhancement, so why? Kill you. Shit, that's wide down, girl. A low growl rose in her throat as the redhead tugged on her mace anew again. For all the good it did her, she may as well have been a child beating her fists against a boulder. When her weapon still refused to be dislodged, she channeled nearly all the prana she had remaining into her mace. Under most circumstances, this wouldn't have availed her much. But in her fit of rage, she made the mistake of overcharging her treasured tool in a frantic attempt to dislodge him. With a deafening roar, Blasted Tree howled to life beneath his boot, its perpetual engine threatening to engulf them both down. For the first time since they'd met, Naruto's pleasant face lost its lazy smile. Hey, whoa, stop you. Cast in the pale glow of her ultimate attack, Berserker of Red flung up his hands. Don't waste your noble phantasm on me. You'll wipe yourself out. I'm just a clone. I'm here to scout, not fight. Besides, I come bearing gifts. Earn me. Fran tilted her head. The wrathful aura abated somewhat. Sheesh, what is with servants in this war? Here. Stabbing a hand behind his back, the blonde muttered crossly to himself as he unfurled the heavy scroll between his shoulders. Much to Fran's chagrin, he showed none of the fear he'd displayed earlier. Rather, he appeared wholly intent on withdrawing an item hidden within the strange material. His hidden hand shot out, presenting her a bouquet of immaculately picked, if a tad crumpled by the ordeal, flowers in full view of her hidden gaze. A slow blink followed as she beheld them, long and ponderous. After a tense moment, Fran reluctantly accepted them. Bringing them to her face, she inhaled. Sweet. Almost cloyingly so. With that, he removed his foot from her mace and skipped back half a step. See, Naruto chirped, watching her heft her mace. I'm harmless. Really, I just came here to scout and lay the occasional prank. But when I saw ya, I couldn't help myself. You looked lonely, hence the flowers. So, tucking his knees beneath him, the blonde dropped to the floor and sat. Wanna talk? Oddly enough, Frankenstein found herself reminded of a large dog she'd once glimpsed in her the early days of her life. For all its bark, at the end of the day it had been a simple creature, happy and eager to please. Had the blonde possessed a tail, she suspected it would have been wagging much like that loyal mutt. Though a part of her bristled at the idea, the rest of her longed for companionship. Master meant well, of course, but he couldn't truly understand the aching pang of loneliness that encompassed her existence and accompanied her every waking moment. More importantly, he wasn't here, and she couldn't fault him for that. He at least knew the release of sleep. She did not. Thus, surely a little chat wouldn't be so bad. After a moment's consideration, Berserker sat beside him, the act causing her wedding dress to bloom around her like a white lily. "Talk," she ground out through gritted teeth. "I believe the lady should go first." "Hern." "Or not," he placated, raising his hands. Naruto must have understood that much, for a chuckle followed. "So?" he inquired. "What do you want from this war? Gotta be something, right? You wouldn't have answered the summoning otherwise." Frankenstein returned her gaze to the picked flowers in her hands, absently squeezing them. "Too personal. Sorry. Shouldn't have asked ya." "Partner." She struggled with the word. "Oh, I get it. That's not a bad wish." Low grunt answered him. No. Much to her chagrin, the whiskered warrior didn't fault her decision. It would have been easier if he had. "I like to think there's somebody for everybody, you know? Take my master, for instance." Thumbing his chin, he cast the scattered field of flowers a nostalgic glance. "She reminds me of my wife in my last life. Sure, she's soft-spoken and gentle to those that know here, but I know she'd sock me if I ever did something stupid in this war. Part of the reason why I intend to win it for her. I'm curious to see what she'll ask the Grail. What you think of yours? You like him?" The stilted silence proved deafening. "Let me guess. That answer involves spoilers." Frankenstein leveled a flat, withering glare upon him. "Geez, you really aren't going to give up the goose on that, are you?" A slow shake of the head told him all he needed to know about that particular subject. She did, however, point a finger at him. "Ha! My wish. Don't have one." Again, those pearly whites flashed out at her, this time in a genuinely boyish smile that had her heart skipping a beat. "I get to live again, and in a younger body to boot. To start over. Set out on a grand adventure, meet new people. It's a regular man's romance. What more could I ask for?" Fran's expression didn't waver. Indeed, her baffled scowl only intensified. If looks could kill, the blonde would be a smoldering pile of ash. "You wound me, madam. I'm not lying." "RG. You know, I could do something about that speech problem of yours." Her fellow berserker flashed his marked palm at her. "Madness. Enhancement isn't easy to circumvent, but it can be done if you have the right tools. Helps if you're mad yourself." Sure enough, the strange shape on his palm seemed to writhe and twist before her eyes as she looked on. "Here, hold still. These." Small pulse struck her throat before she could protest, earning him a dark look. "Relax, it doesn't last long. It might cost me a bit of energy to make it permanent, but I'm sure my master wouldn't mind too much." "Why?" Her voice emerged, harsh and grating to her own ears. Naruto snorted. "Let me ask you this. Why not?" he replied, resting his chin on a palm. "I like helping people. Kinda my thing, if you hadn't noticed. It's in my legend and everything." She hated it. "But I didn't ask. Didn't want to speak to him." Words threatened to burst out of her, and with them, all the pain of her past. Don't talk, don't speak. She hated it, feared the own sound of her words. Somewhere in the back of her mind a key turned, and for a fleeting handful of seconds, her mind opened and she found herself able to think coherently. Icy fingers of dread trailed down her spine, and with an effort, she mastered both them and her sudden sense of self. Ugh, if this was what it meant to be sane, she'd happily sink back into blissful madness. Fran chewed her lip and shook her head, tucking her knees into her chest. I can't. Hey, you don't have to. I can't. Hey, you don't have to decide now, the scout soothed, patting her shoulder. Like I said, it's only temporary. Just know the offer's on the table, if you ever change your mind. Those piercing blue eyes seemed to regard her for a long moment, silently taking her measure before coming to a decision. Fuck it, he decided at last. What would you say to a ceasefire? I don't attack you. You don't attack me. Sound good? Fran cocked her head, her bangs swaying just so to reveal a golden iris. What? Well, you seem like an upstanding person, and you actually listened to me. Naruto pointed out. Caster and Archer tried to skewer me before I even saw them in the castle, so they can fuck right off. Lancer seems like a stuck-up bugger. Haven't seen Ryder or Saber yet, but I doubt they'll listen to reason unless I tie them down, and that'd take way too much energy. Ergo. Finger poked her horn. You're it. Mercifully, when she opened her mouth, wordless gibberish emerged. Whatever fleeting remedy he'd inflicted upon her had run its course. Even then, Berserker of Red ferreted out her intent and bobbed his head in agreement. What? You want to know that? How did I get up here? He posited, holding up a finger. Well, I had to sneak into the castle the old-fashioned way, scale the wall and everything. Even had to knock out a few homunculus on the way. I'm pretty sure I tripped all manner of alarms. Also, I may have nailed your Lancer with a stink bomb a few minutes before I ran into you. So he's gonna be why. There you are, fiend. As if to punctuate that very statement, a hail of stakes descended from on high and skewered the doppelganger from head to toe. The act was so sharp and sudden that Frankenstein found herself jerking backwards out of shock. But rather than bleed, the doppelganger merely boomed out a laugh. Though his body now resembled little more than a human pincushion, the clone still retained the wherewithal to face the battlements and snap off a smart, one-fingered salute towards his would-be killer. Nice! Try, Lancer. Better luck next time. See you later, Fran. The clone flashed her a thumbs up and vanished in a plume of smoke, leaving the gleaming hoard of memories it had accumulated to return to the original. Scene break. Jeanne d'Arc had bore witness to many strange phenomena in her day. Saint of Orleans though she may well be, she was no stranger to war and its trappings. Indeed, one might call her a veteran of such an affair. She'd long since learned to harden her heart both in and out of combat, to accept wounding others as a necessary, if painful, evil of battle. Sometimes conflict could not be avoided. There were times when words failed and swords had to be drawn. As the impartial mediator between the two factions and the representative for the Great Holy Grail War, she knew she'd have to defend herself sooner or later, likely from other servants, some of whom might even assault her outright. Finding herself under attack straight out the gate, let alone by Lancer of Red, wasn't something Jeanne had predicted per se. But it was well within the range of her calculations. Yet what followed, that was new. Dynamic entry. Like a thunderclap from on high, a bolt of crimson tore through the clouds, momentarily giving light to the night. It was with a terrible foreboding that Ruler turned her gaze skyward, just in time to see someone or something rocket out of the sky and deliver a blazing dropkick to Lancer's unprepared gut. Caught unawares, the servant scarcely had time to grunt before his attacker's momentum caught up with them. A deafening explosion followed hot on the heels of the new arrival's landing, the sheer scope of which forced her to leap back just to escape the blast zone alone. Ruler wondered if she'd finally lost her mind. Yes, she reasoned, surely she must have. Nothing else made sense. For someone even a servant to simply fall out of the sky itself and crash headlong into her opponent was so absurd as to border on madness. She knew for a fact that she didn't possess X-rank luck. The likelihood of a warrior commencing an orbital drop on someone was so ludicrous as to be non-existent. He'd appeared so suddenly that she nearly checked her command seals out of habit, just to make certain she hadn't utilized one by mistake. Yes, they were still there. Although she retained the ability to summon a servant of either faction to her side using such a seal, she certainly hadn't. So, where, or more aptly, who, had just come to her rescue? And he sticks the landing! A boisterous voice split the night, booming with a poignant cackle. Thank you! Thank you, baby. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week, folks. Despite her gentle nature, Ruler could feel the sweat drop upon the back of her head. Ha! Now, that was a dynamic entry, the newcomer declared emphatically, still unseen. Guy would have been proud. As Jeanne looked on in quiet consternation, a cloaked silhouette rose from the fog and smoke, gradually giving way to a brightly clad figure. A broad back emerged, bearing a crimson cloak and hefty scroll over its shoulders. Belatedly, she realized the newcomer was facing in the opposite direction. Her disbelief intensified once she realized he'd actually had the gall to strike up a pose of all things. One fist jutted skyward, a lone thumb flicked upward in approval, as if he were awaiting a photograph. Blue eyes emerged, framed by whiskered cheeks and wild blonde hair, a crazed smile that had seen all the evils of the world and returned unscathed. Ah, I see now. That explained it. She'd been saved by a hopeless idiot. Because this was most emphatically a servant. Still, the question remained, was this one friend or foe? Wait, this was no time for such unbecoming thoughts. Shaking herself mightily, Ruler seized her flag, mustered up the faltering scraps of her sanity, and straightened her back. Untimely though the rescue might have been, she had no way of knowing if this individual would attack her on sight as Lancer had. At a glance he didn't appear to possess a weapon of any kind, but then again, the lack of an armament could hardly be cause for relief. He could be this war's saber for all she knew. Speaking of classes, she found it strange that she couldn't identify him. Whomever he was, mana leaked from him like a broken sieve. No, that wasn't quite it. It wasn't that he leaked prana, but rather he couldn't seem to contain it. The mere act of breathing radiated energy, as though he were only just keeping himself in check. For all his laughter, she suspected the smile was little more than act, a facade put on to deter others. Her unique position in this war and the information she'd been afforded from the Grail were suddenly of no service to her. Rather than recognizing the newcomer, she experienced a strange sense of unease. Doubly on guard then. Clearly, the servants of this war weren't afraid to attack her outright. Alas, her curiosity won the day in the end. Excuse me, but who are VYP? The stranger moved with such speed that Jean could have sworn he teleported. There one moment and gone the next. She didn't notice him until he appeared before her. Strong hands clasped around her own and held faced, drawing a soft squeak of surprise from the Maiden of Orleans. Not just the inhuman strength behind his grasp, but at the blazing blue eyes suddenly inches from her own. A fleeting heartbeat passed between the two blondes, broken only by the distant sound of rubble tumbling out of the crater that the latter had created. Red or black? I beg your pardon. Jeanne blinked, a tad alarmed. His expression hardened. Red or black? And neither, she sputtered out before he could attack. Glimmer of understanding dawned in that her-stopping gaze. Oh, is that so? In that case, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, Berserker of Red, at your service. And you are... Oh heavens, where were her manners? I am the judge of the Grail War, Jeanne d'Arc. She hedged, sketching a faint nod. I thank thee for your assistance, Berserker. The blonde blinked, and the tension drained out of him. "Oh, so you're ruler then? Woo, sorry about that back there." At her petulant expression, he clapped his hands together in affirmation and awkwardly scratched the back of his head. "You have no idea what a relief it is to hear that." "Seriously? Would have been awkward if I saved someone from the black faction. In any case, you should probably step back because that bastard's probably going to get right back up any second now. And when he does, he'll be pissed to all hell, oh geez." Roaring burst of napalm barreled into the blonde's back and catapulted him forward into the mud. That was a powerful shot. A low voice growled as the blonde kicked himself upright. "You actually knocked me out for a second there. It won't happen again." Blondie, mind telling me who he is then?" For a moment, Jan nearly decided to hold her tongue. In the end, she thought better of it. Mad or not, Berserker had come to her rescue, and he'd proven himself a pleasant enough sort. She wouldn't fight for him against Lancer, for that would violate her duties as mediator, but she wasn't opposed to obliging him that much at the very least. "That," she began, turning her gaze towards the pale warrior climbing over the lip of the crater, "would be Lancer of Red, the hero god Karna, son of the sun, god Shurya." As she looked on, the blonde's exuberant expression turned ashen. "Wait, that's Karna, the actual Karna?" His face soured, as though he'd taken a bite out of something incredibly foul. "Well, bugger me. I wasn't expecting to fight another deity right off the bat. Kaguya was bad enough. You're telling me I kicked him?" "You did." Don't suppose you'd be willing to help me?" Despite her best efforts, the ghost of a smile plucked at Jane's lips. "I will not," she declared. "It is my duty to remain neutral in this war, not to behind you." The cry burst out of her despite her best attempts to stifle it. A harsh clang caught the whiskered warrior's attention, and his arm snapped up a heartbeat later to ward off what would have been a mortal blow. Wincing at his charred sleeve, those wild eyes shot northward. Oi, oi, oi! Easy there, hothead. Don't suppose we could talk about this?" Rather than attack, Karna regarded him inquisitively. "Do you mean to face me unarmed?" Naruto's grin darkened. "Unfortunately, I'm in a bit of a reduced state thanks to the circumstances of my summoning." "Gee," the blonde shrugged eloquently, shaking himself like a wet dog. "Damn shame too. I would have loved to tussle with you at my peak. Our battle would have been one for the ages. But for now, I don't have time to deal with you, so I'm gonna have to send you flying." "Oh?" Karna divined, tilting his head. "You say that as if you possess enough power to hurt me." "Something like that. I may not be the same class as you, but I've beaten a god before." The low resonating laugh that followed chilled ruler to her bones and beyond. Inhaling calmly, Berserker closed his eyes and began to draw power. "Right then, gotta pull as much sage chakra as I can, and on." The world screamed at him. "Kill you!" As though a frozen hand forged from the very ice of hell had pierced his chest and gripped his heart. So too did Naruto feel himself freeze. The sudden rush of power he'd gathered slipped through his fingers like an unruly eel, leaving him on his knees and gasping for breath. In its place, the furious voice of the world shrieked at him, clawing his thoughts to pieces, one that required all his willpower just to silence. Severing his tether with nature, he wiped a thick bead of sweat from his brow. "Well, shit. Wonder what changed Gak." With a yelp, he ducked under Karna's lance and kicked up with his heel. Lancer's weapon descended in kind, roaring down on him with a low roar of flames. Steel met flesh, and neither yielded. Rather, she realized, Berserker had somehow managed to catch Karna's golden weapon before it could tear him limb from limb. Impossible as it might seem, he stood his ground. Even now, the taller of the two remained rooted, gripping that gleaming shaft of polished metal with a determined grimace. Ruler observed the struggle with a mildly concerned gaze, unyielding as the two warriors grappled with one another, neither gaining the advantage, though the two titans struggled. "Are you a servant of Black, then?" Karna inquired, bearing down on the blonde berserker. "In which case, you too must be after ruler." "Sorry to disappoint you," Naruto grunted, "but I'm Berserker of Red, not Black." Flicker of confusion gleamed in Lancer's steely gaze, quickly stifled. "I see. Might I ask your name then, Berserker of Red?" Crimson eyes blazed up at him, teeming with rage. "Uzumaki! Naruto! Now grit your teeth!" "Grit my..." Using Lancer's weapon as leverage, Naruto reeled him in like a hooked fish. Rasengan. To Lancer's credit, he beheld the spiraling sphere and narrowly evaded it by wrenching his body to the side at the last. Berserker's arm shot past, the outstretched fingers clenching into a fist around the sphere. Not a heartbeat later found the limb severed neatly at the elbow. Until quite suddenly, it didn't. Lancer's great weapon phased through an empty afterimage and immediately found itself entrapped a second time. A harsh squeeze stifled the snarling orb and arced upward, the limb bending at an impossible angle. Of course, Jan realized. It only stood to reason Berserker would have another ace up his sleeve. She simply hadn't expected it to be so simple. Aura? Clenched knuckles thundered into Karna's unsuspecting visage from all angles as Jan looked on, a pounding percussion akin to the drums of a great hunt out for blood. Once, twice, thrice. 3 successive blows hammered upright into the startled servant's visage before he had the chance to recover, the fourth taking him hard on the chin and wrenching the pale warrior upright. Momentarily stunned by the strike, the deity nevertheless maintained his ironclad hold upon his weapon, for all the good it did him only to find himself hauled in yet again. Perhaps had he simply let go, he might have escaped what followed. Alas, he did not. Instead, he chose to stand his ground. To her dismay, comprehension dawned in those pale eyes. "I see. So that's one of your noble phantasm, is it? Peerless physical speed and endurance. Very well then. I shall retaliate in kind. Brahmastra Kunda." "See? That's the great thing about being a berserker." Naruto's voice interjected as flames split the heavens. Grinning, he cocked his arm back, eyes blazing red. "We don't fight fair. But more importantly..." Crimson light enshrouded his outstretched arm, sheathing it in a strange scarlet tether not unlike that of some great bestial claw. No, more than that. A lariat, she realized, the words springing to her mind unbidden. Whatever it was, it leaped forward and crunched against Karna's half-prepared attack, barreling through it with ease. The ruby arm crunched against Karna's face, bodily catapulting him into the sky. "We cheat." Rather than waste any more of his strength in a pointless struggle for control of the lance, Berserker forsook defense altogether. This, of course, freed his dominant hand, and flung himself onto the offensive. With a roar, the whiskered warrior snapped both arms back, wrapping them in that telltale crimson aura once more. Then he unleashed a torrent of blows upon his unprepared foe, hammering a series of rousing roundhouses into Lancer's side, solar plexus, lungs, throat, every open space he could find that wasn't protected by armor. And some that were... Still, Lancer didn't fall. In time, the warrior of sun regained his lost ground and struck back. As the sun rose, his spear became little more than a flicker of golden radiance, striking at impossible angles, seeming to bend and twist to lunge at Berserker's head. A strike to the arm, followed by an overhead smash, a lunging thrust piercing Naruto's side, all went unanswered. No, Jan realized. It wasn't that Berserker didn't retaliate, but rather, he couldn't. Though his blows shook the earth and his toxic aura lashed out with just as much ferocity, he continued to fall back, as if something were physically limiting, preventing him from utilizing his full might. What his true noble phantasm sealed somehow. As such, it came as something of a surprise when the blonde blurred and alighted on a ruined portion of the highway. Harsh stomp upturned still more of the ravaged road, upturning it to create a temporary pillar. "Do you flee, Berserker?" Lancer challenged. "Pretty much." The blonde shrugged back from his impromptu perch. "Look, I can't fight you properly as I am now. Something I'm sure you've noticed. But I'm not all that keen on leaving you to attack Ruler either. Mind? If we put this fight on hold until tomorrow," he grinned. "I'll have permission by then, and I'll gladly give you the fight of your life." To his credit, Karna almost seemed to consider Naruto's proposal. In the end, however, he shook his head. "My master's orders are absolute." As Ruler looked on, the pale warrior almost seemed to sag. "Out of respect, I will not give chase should you flee, but I've been commanded to take Ruler's head." "Ah, that's a pity," Naruto sighed. "Well, then I have only one retort to that effect." Flicker of movement danced in Lancer's peripherals. "Bite me." Jen started. Again came that short, sharp, explosive burst of speed, this time rendering the pillar little more than crumbled asphalt. Had her eyes betrayed her, or did he glow just before he disappeared? Sure, it must have been her imagination. No, when it faded, she found Berserker had finally reached Lancer. A long hand thrust itself forward and slapped against Karna's exposed chest. Uncaring of the spear thrust clean through his stomach, Naruto flashed an impish grin up at his foe, laughed even, as that strange symbol blossomed against Lancer's visible skin. "Have a nice flight." In a subdued flicker of golden light, Lancer vanished, leaving Berserker behind with that gaping souvenir. Not even a lasting one at that. To Ruler's disbelief, the ragged gash in his back mended effortlessly, sucking that strange crimson aura back into Naruto's body from whence it came. Just what kind of body was that? You? What did you just do?" "Ha!" Heedless of her confusion, the blonde belted out a happy cry, collapsing onto his haunches in a fit of laughter. "Let's see how he likes that. I had to break another damn kunai just to send him away. Good thing, too. I can't use that trick easily." A small snicker fled from his lips as he covered his mouth with a scorched hand. I wish I could see the look on his face. It'd be one for the scrapbook. Jen felt, rather than saw herself collapse. All the tension had been drained away in an instant, leaving naught but hollow echoes behind. "No worries," Naruto reassured her, climbing to his feet. "He's halfway across Trifas now. Should take him some time to come back, unless his master wants to waste a command seal. In any case, I think we're out of danger for the time being." I see." She tried to muster some semblance of propriety, only for her knees to buckle spectacularly. She'd nearly forgotten about her own battle and the exhaustion that came with it. Quick as you please, Berserker flitted back right to her side like a pale shade. Sure enough, that piercing gaze found her right calf, where the armor had been scorched clean through. The flames of the sun were nothing to scoff at even as she registered them. The pain came roaring back in a red tide, eliciting a wince from the holy maiden. "Shit, you banged up your leg pretty badly," Naruto breathed, inspecting her wound. Despite herself, she colored at his concern. "It's nothing, really." "Nothing my ass," the warrior scoffed. "That's a bad burn. Rest assured this will not impede my goodness." Yelp burst out of her as he made her sit. Wordlessly, he tore off his right sleeve. "Just hold still, will ya?"